The Great Hall of the Galactic Alliance was built for giants. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Representatives from 100 different species filled the curved seats that circled the central platform. Commander Taiho Park stood alone on that platform. He was not a tall man. His hair was gray at the temples, and his face carried the lines of someone who had seen too much. He wore a simple dark uniform with no decorations except a small Earth flag on his shoulder. Around him, the aliens whispered and clicked and hummed in their many languages. The Velith High Speaker rose from his throne. He was 12 feet tall, with skin like polished silver and 4 arms that moved with liquid grace. His eyes were solid black, and when he spoke, his voice filled the entire chamber without effort. The human delegation requests membership in the Galactic Alliance, the High Speaker announced. They also offer military assistance in our war against the Hollow. Laughter rippled through the assembly. It came in many forms. The Velith made a sound like wind chimes. The insectoid Kreth clicked their mandibles rapidly. The crystalline Durrani rang like bells struck softly. Taiho did not react. He simply stood with his hands clasped behind his back and waited. A Kreth representative rose from the insectoid section. She was covered in hard black armor that was part of her body, and her compound eyes reflected Taiho's image 1,000 times. With respect to the human delegation, she said, though her tone held no respect at all, what exactly do you believe you can offer? We have studied your species. You are small. You are slow. You require sleep for 1/3 of your existence. Your bones break under pressure that a Kreth child could endure. Your skin tears. You cannot survive in vacuum for even 1 minute. You have no natural weapons. No claws, no venom, no armor. More laughter from the assembly. A Durrani delegate chimed in. The Durrani were beautiful in a strange way. Their bodies were made of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. Additionally, the Durrani said, your species lives for less than 100 cycles. Some of us in this chamber have been alive for thousands of cycles. What wisdom can such a short-lived species possibly possess? Taiho listened to all of this. His expression did not change. When the laughter finally died down, he spoke. You are correct, he said. His voice was quiet, but somehow it carried to every seat in the vast chamber. Humans are fragile. We break easily. We die easily. We are not born with armor or claws or the ability to survive in the cold of space. He paused and looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as he could. But you have made a mistake in your analysis, he continued. You have studied what humans are. You have not studied what humans become. The High Speaker leaned forward slightly. Explain. Taiho reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and a holographic image appeared above the central platform. It showed a planet, blue and green and white, beautiful and fragile looking. This is Earth, Taiho said. Our home. It is not a kind world. The ground shakes and swallows cities. The sky fills with storms that flatten everything in their path. The seas rise up and drown coastlines. Fire falls from the sky. Ice covers entire continents. Plagues sweep through populations and kill millions. He pressed another button. The image changed. Now it showed humans. Ancient humans, dressed in animal skins, facing a massive creature with tusks and fur. When we were young, we had no claws, so we made spears. We had no armor, so we learned to dodge. We could not run as fast as the predators that hunted us, so we learned to run longer. We would chase an animal for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We could not survive the cold, so we took fire and made it ours. The hologram shifted again. Soldiers in trenches. Ships on stormy seas. Aircraft falling from the sky in flames. You say we break easily. This is true. But you have not understood what this means. It means that every human who reaches adulthood has already survived. Every human who grows old has survived longer. And some humans have survived things that should have killed them many times over. He paused and let the silence stretch. We call them veterans. The high speaker's forearms shifted in what might have been discomfort. Veterans? Survivors of war, Taiho said. Humans have been fighting each other since before we had written language. We have developed 10,000 ways to kill and 10,000 ways to avoid being killed. Every generation, we fight. And every generation, some of us survive. Those survivors carry knowledge that cannot be taught. It can only be earned through blood and pain and loss. He turned off the holographic display and stood in silence for a moment. The Hollow have been defeating your forces for 3 cycles, he said. I have read the reports. They overwhelm you with numbers. They adapt to your tactics within days. They feel no fear and no pain. They do not stop until they are destroyed. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The war against the Hollow was going badly. Everyone knew this. No one liked to talk about it. Earth offers 50,000 veterans, Taiho said. Volunteers only. Men and women who have already faced death many times and chosen to face it again. They will fight the Hollow. The Kreth representative made a scoffing sound. 50,000? Against the Hollow swarms? That is not an army. That is a sacrifice. Perhaps, Taiho said. But I wonder if you truly understand what you are refusing. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small metal disc. He held it up so the light caught it. This is a medal, he said. It was given to my grandfather. He earned it in a war on Earth, fighting in mountains so cold that men froze to death standing up. He was shot 3 times. He lost 2 fingers to frostbite. He watched his closest friends die beside him. He was 19 years old. Taiho put the medal away. He lived to be 93. He raised a family. He told me stories. And when he died, peacefully in his bed, the doctors found 17 pieces of metal still inside his body. Shrapnel that had been there for 70 years. He looked around the chamber one more time. You think humans are weak because we break. But we are not our bodies. We are what remains after the breaking. And what remains does not stop, does not quit, does not surrender. You want to know what humans can offer your war. We offer the thing that has kept us alive on a planet that has tried to kill us for 200,000 years. He straightened his uniform and prepared to leave the platform. We offer stubbornness. We offer spite. We offer the absolute refusal to stay down when we are knocked down. You may laugh at us now, but I promise you this. The Hollow have never faced anything like a human veteran. And when they do, they will learn what we learned long ago. He began walking toward the exit. The universe is not kind. It does not care if you live or die. The only thing that matters is whether you keep fighting. He stopped at the door and looked back. We keep fighting, always. He left the chamber in silence. No one was laughing anymore. 3 days later, the Galactic Alliance accepted Earth's offer. They did not expect much. They simply needed bodies to throw at the Hollow. While they prepared their real defenses, they had no idea what they had just invited into their war. Transport Station Kira 7 hung in orbit above a jungle moon called Vethor 3. The station was old and battle-scarred. Hollow attacks came almost every week now. The walls were patched with different metals where repairs had been made too many times. The air recyclers hummed with a tired sound, and the lights flickered when the power systems struggled. Station Commander Velric stood at the main docking bay, watching the human transport ship approach. He was a Velith, tall and silver-skinned, but younger than most of his kind. This was his first command. He had been given Kira 7 because no one else wanted it. The station was considered lost. The moon below was considered lost. Everyone assigned here was simply waiting to die. The human transport was an ugly thing. It had no smooth curves or elegant lines. It was just a metal box with engines attached. Practical, functional, unbeautiful. The docking, clamps engaged with a heavy thunk. Velric straightened his posture and prepared to meet the human soldiers. He expected young warriors, probably frightened, probably poorly trained. Cannon fodder. That was what the Alliance had requested, and that was what the Alliance expected to receive. The airlock doors opened with a hiss. The first human through the door was a woman. She was not young. Her hair was more gray than black, pulled back in a tight knot. Her face was weathered, with deep lines around her eyes and mouth. A scar ran from her left eyebrow down to her cheek, just missing her eye. She walked with a slight limp, but her back was straight and her gaze was steady. She stopped in front of Velric and saluted. Her movement was crisp and practiced, the product of decades of repetition. "Sergeant Major Yunji Beek," she said. "1st Battalion, Earth Expeditionary Force, reporting for duty." Behind her, more humans filed through the airlock. Velric watched them come, and his confusion grew with each passing moment. They were old. Not ancient, but far from young. Men and women in their 40s, 50s, 60s. Some even older. Many of them had visible scars. One man was missing his left arm below the elbow. A woman had a metal plate visible on the side of her shaved head. Another man walked with a mechanical brace on his leg that whirred softly with each step. They carried equipment bags and weapons cases. They moved with a calm efficiency that spoke of long experience. No one rushed. No one wasted motion. Every step had purpose. A Kreth liaison officer approached Velric. Her compound eyes clicked as she observed the arriving humans. "These are the warriors Earth has sent?" she asked. Her tone was incredulous. "They appear damaged, old, broken." Yunji heard the comment. She turned to face the Kreth officer, and something in her eyes made the insectoid take a small step backward. "We are not broken," Yunji said quietly. "We are what happens when humans survive long enough to learn." More humans continued to pour through the airlock. Velric watched them spread out through the docking bay, organizing themselves without any apparent orders. Small groups formed naturally. Equipment was distributed. Weapons were checked with practiced hands. A one-armed man approached Yunji and spoke quietly in the human language. Yunji nodded and turned back to Velric. "Station Commander," she said. "This is Captain Dongwook Yoon, Naval Warfare Specialist. He will need access to your tactical databases." Velric looked at the one-armed man. Dongwook was in his early 50s, with short gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Where his left arm ended, just below the elbow, a simple metal cap covered the stump. No fancy prosthetic. No mechanical replacement. Just a cap. "How did you lose the arm?" Velric asked before he could stop himself. Dongwook glanced down at his stump as if he had forgotten it was there. "Submarine implosion," he said. 30 years ago. Pressure hull failed at depth. I was lucky. Lucky? The other 47 men in my compartment died." He said it simply, without emotion, like he was reporting the weather. Then he walked past Velric toward the command center, apparently already knowing where to go. More humans introduced themselves. Master Sergeant Ham Lim, combat medic. She was a small woman with gentle eyes and steady hands. But when she smiled, Velric noticed that several of her teeth were metal replacements. Private First Class Junho Shin, drone operator. He was the youngest of the group at 41, but he moved with a strange carefulness, like someone who had learned the hard way that sudden movements attracted attention. "You seem disappointed," Yunji said to Velric. The Velith commander hesitated. It seemed rude to say what he was thinking, but the human woman was looking at him with those steady, knowing eyes, and he found himself speaking anyway. "I expected younger soldiers," he admitted. "Stronger, more intact." Yunji nodded as if this was exactly what she had expected to hear. "Commander, may I tell you something about humans?" Velric gestured for her to continue. "When humans are young, we think we are immortal. We are fast and strong and brave, but we are also stupid. We take risks we should not take. We trust our strength to save us. Many young humans die because of this." She paused and looked around the docking bay at her fellow veterans. "The humans you see here are not young. They are not fast or strong, but they are still alive. Every single one of them has faced death and survived. Not once, not twice. Many times. They have been shot, stabbed, burned, frozen, poisoned, and broken in ways you cannot imagine. And they are still here." She turned back to Velric. "Young soldiers are brave. Old soldiers are careful. And careful soldiers survive long enough to become wise. You are looking at 50,000 humans who have been fighting wars longer than some of your species have been alive. We do not have claws. We do not have armor. We do not have the strength of the Velith or the speed of the Kreth. But we have something else." "What?" Yunji smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had seen the worst the universe had to offer and decided to keep going anyway. "Experience," she said, "and patience. The Hollow are not the first enemy we have faced that was stronger than us. They are not the first enemy that felt no fear and no pain. They are not the first enemy that outnumbered us. We have been fighting such enemies since before we left our home world." She picked up her equipment bag and slung it over her shoulder. "You have given us the worst sector. The jungle moon that everyone says is already lost. Good. We prefer it that way. No one will bother us while we work." "Work?" Velric asked. "We need to study the Hollow," Unji said. "Learn how they think, how they move, how they communicate. The Alliance has been fighting them for 3 cycles, and you still use the same tactics that failed in the first year. You build walls. You hold positions. You react to their attacks." She shook her head. "We do not react. We prepare. We plan. We set traps that spring days or weeks or months later. We fight the war we want to fight, not the war our enemy offers us." She started walking toward the shuttle bay that would take her down to the moon's surface. "Give us 1 month," she said over her shoulder. "Then come and see what old, broken humans can do." Velric watched her go. Around him, the rest of the human veterans were already moving, loading shuttles, checking equipment, preparing for deployment. No one complained. No one hesitated. They simply moved forward, like water flowing downhill. The Kreth liaison officer stood beside Velric, watching with her 1,000 faceted eyes. "They are not what I expected," she admitted. Velric nodded slowly. "No, they are not." He watched the last shuttle detach and begin its descent toward the jungle moon. Something told him that the next month would be very interesting indeed. The jungle of Vethra 3 was hot and wet and alive with sounds that never stopped. Strange birds screamed in the canopy. Insects the size of human fists buzzed through the thick air. The trees grew so tall and so close together that sunlight only reached the ground in scattered patches. Lieutenant Colonel Minjae-han crouched in a foxhole covered with leaves and branches. He was 62 years old, with a face like cracked leather and hands that had killed more enemies than he could count. Beside him, A Durrani observer named Crystalline Peak trembled so hard that its body chimed like wind chimes in a storm. "They are coming," Crystalline Peak whispered. Its voice was beautiful, like singing glass, but the fear in it was ugly. "The sensors show thousands. Tens of thousands. We should retreat." Minjay did not look at the Durrani. His eyes were fixed on a small tablet that showed thermal imaging of the jungle ahead. Red shapes moved through the darkness between the trees. Many red shapes. More than he could count. "We do not retreat," Minjay said calmly. "We adapt." In foxholes and hidden positions throughout the jungle, the veterans of Earth waited. They had spent 3 weeks preparing for this night. Not building walls. The Alliance had tried walls, and the Hollow had simply climbed over them or dug under them or smashed through them. The veterans had tried something different. They had watched. They had learned. They had planned. Sergeant Major Yunji was positioned half a kilometer to the north, overlooking a narrow valley that the Hollow would have to pass through. She lay flat on her stomach in the mud, a rifle with a long scope cradled in her arms. She was not young enough to move fast anymore, but her eyes were still sharp and her hands were still steady. Her radio crackled softly. "All units, this is command. Enemy forces entering primary engagement zone in 3 minutes. Hold fire until my signal." The voice belonged to Captain Dongwoo-kyun. He was coordinating the battle from a small bunker, 2 kilometers behind the front line. His one remaining hand moved across a tactical display, tracking every unit, every sensor, every piece of the trap they had spent 3 weeks building. The Hollow came through the jungle like a wave of nightmares. They were part machine and part flesh, built from the harvested bodies of 100 different species. Some walked on 2 legs. Some crawled on many. Some flew on wings that should not have been able to lift their metal and meat bodies. They made no sound except for the clicking of their mechanical parts and the wet squelch of their organic components. Crystalline Peak's trembling grew worse. "They will overrun us," the Durrani said. "They always overrun us. We should flee while we still can." Minjay finally looked at the alien observer. His eyes were calm, peaceful even. The eyes of a man who had accepted his death many times and stopped being afraid of it. "Watch," he said, "and learn." The first wave of Hollow reached the tree line. They moved with terrible efficiency, spreading out to cover as much ground as possible. This was how they always attacked. Overwhelming numbers. No fear, no hesitation. Just an endless tide of death that washed over everything in its path. Dongwook's voice came through the radio again. Now, 17,000 directional mines detonated at once. The jungle erupted in fire and thunder. Trees shattered. Earth flew into the air. The front ranks of the Hollow simply ceased to exist, torn apart by shaped charges that the veterans had placed with careful precision over 3 weeks of preparation. But the Hollow did not stop. They never stopped. More of them poured over the bodies of their fallen, climbing through the burning jungle. Driven by the hive mind that controlled them all. This was expected. The mines were not meant to destroy the swarm. They were meant to shape it. The surviving Hollow funneled into narrow corridors between the blast zones. These corridors had been designed by veterans who understood how panicked creatures moved, how terrain could be used as a weapon, how to turn an enemy's numbers against them. In the corridors, death waited. Corporal Sujin Kwan was 67 years old. She had 4 grandchildren back on Earth. She had been a sharpshooter for 40 years, and her eyes were not as good as they used to be. But she had learned to compensate. She knew how to breathe, how to wait, how to let the target come to her. She lay in a concealed position overlooking one of the kill corridors. Her rifle was old, a ballistic weapon that the Alliance considered primitive. But it fired a heavy round that could punch through hollow armor at 300 meters. And Sujin knew exactly where to aim. The first hollow entered her corridor. She fired. It fell. Another followed. She fired again. It fell too. She did not rush. She did not panic. She simply waited for each target to present itself, then placed a single round exactly where it needed to go. By the time the corridor was clear, she had 47 confirmed kills. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Veterans who had fought in deserts and mountains and cities picked apart the hollow with patient, methodical precision. They did not try to hold ground. They did not form lines. They fought like water, flowing around obstacles, filling gaps, always staying one step ahead of the enemy. Master Sergeant Han Lim moved through the chaos with her medical kit. She found a wounded veteran pinned behind a fallen tree, his leg shattered by hollow claws. She dragged him to cover, stopped the bleeding, stabilized the wound, all while plasma fire burned the air above her head. "Stay still," she told him. "You will live." "I can still fight," he said through gritted teeth. "Later. Rest now." She moved on to the next casualty, then the next, then the next. She had been saving lives for 35 years. A few hollow were not going to stop her. Private First Class Jun Ho Shin sat in a bunker, his hands moving across drone controls. He had 20 small drones in the air, each one feeding him information about hollow positions. When he saw a concentration forming, he passed the coordinates to the mortar teams. When he saw a flanking attempt, he warned the units in its path. He had been doing this for 15 years. The drones were his eyes and his ears. The jungle was dark and chaotic, but Junho saw everything. The battle lasted 6 hours. The hollow kept coming, kept pushing, kept trying to overwhelm the human positions with sheer numbers. But every attack was predicted. Every advance was channeled into another kill zone. Every attempt to flank was spotted and countered by dawn. The assault was broken. Minjae stood up from his foxhole and looked out over the battlefield. Thousands of hollow bodies lay scattered through the jungle. The trees were blackened and burning. The air smelled of smoke and blood and burned metal. Crystalline Peak stood beside him, its crystal body no longer trembling. The Durrani was staring at the carnage with something like wonder. "You won," Crystalline Peak said. Its voice was hushed. "The hollow attacked with their full force, and you won." Minjae shook his head. "We did not win. We survived." "There is a difference." "No." The Durrani turned to face him. "I have observed many battles against the hollow. I have watched Velith legions fall. I have watched Kreth hive warriors die by the thousands. No one has ever done what you did tonight. No one has ever made the hollow pay such a price for so little gain." Minjae looked at the alien for a long moment. Then he smiled just slightly. "We are old," he said. "We are slow. We are broken in many ways. But we have learned something that your alliance has not." "What?" "The hollow are not unstoppable. They are predictable. They have one way of fighting, and they do it the same way every time. They swarm. They overwhelm. They consume. But they do not think. They do not adapt. They do not learn." He gestured at the battlefield. "We do." Crystalline Peak transmitted footage of the battle back to Alliance Command. Within hours, it had been viewed by military leaders across the galaxy. Within days, a new word had entered the galactic vocabulary. Veteran. It meant survivor. It meant wisdom earned through blood. It meant the kind of stubborn refusal to die that only came from facing death again and again, and choosing to keep fighting anyway. The Alliance had sent the humans to Vethra 3, expecting them to die. Instead, they had shown the galaxy what humans were truly capable of, and this was only the beginning. The Alliance War Council chamber was silent. Not the comfortable silence of peace, but the heavy silence of beings who had just been forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew. General Yuna Choi stood at the center of the chamber. She was 71 years old, with white hair cut short and practical. Her uniform was simple, without decoration. Her face was calm, but her eyes missed nothing. She had commanded soldiers for 50 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had buried friends and enemies and learned that sometimes there was little difference between the two. Around her, the representatives of 100 species watched and waited. The Velith High Speaker sat on his throne, his forearms folded across his chest. The Kreth delegation clicked their mandibles nervously. The Durrani chimed softly among themselves. They had all seen the footage from Vethra 3. They had all watched the old, broken humans defeat a hollow assault that should have destroyed them. Now they wanted to understand how. "General Choi," the High Speaker said. His voice was different now. The mockery was gone. In its place was something that might have been respect. "Your forces have achieved what no Alliance military has managed in 3 cycles of war. We wish to understand." Yuna nodded. She had prepared for this moment. "High Speaker," she said, "may I ask you a question first?" The High Speaker's black eyes narrowed slightly, but he gestured for her to continue. "How old is the Velith species?" The question seemed to surprise him. "We achieved spaceflight approximately 40,000 of your Earth cycles ago. And in that time, how many wars has your species fought?" The High Speaker considered. "Several. Perhaps a dozen major conflicts. Our advancement was relatively peaceful compared to some species." Yuna turned to the Kreth delegation. "And the Kreth? How many wars?" The senior Kreth representative answered. "We are a hive species. Internal conflict is rare. We have fought perhaps 20 wars against external enemies since achieving spaceflight." Yuna nodded slowly. Then she raised her hand, and a holographic display appeared above the center of the chamber. It showed Earth, rotating slowly. "Humans have been a spacefaring species for less than 200 years, she said. "In that time, we have fought among ourselves more than you can count. But that is not what I want to show you." The hologram changed. Now it showed a timeline stretching back thousands of years. Red marks appeared along the timeline, so many that they blurred together into an almost solid line. "This is human history," Yuna said. "Each red mark represents a war. Not a skirmish. Not a border dispute. A war. With armies and navies and death on a scale you cannot imagine." She let that sink in for a moment. "In the last 10,000 years, humans have fought over 8,000 documented wars. We have killed each other with rocks and spears and swords and guns and bombs that can destroy entire cities. We have fought in deserts so hot that flesh burns and mountains so cold that blood freezes. We have fought underwater and in the air and in the spaces between." The hologram shifted again. Now it showed images from human history. Soldiers in trenches, surrounded by mud and death. Ships sinking in frozen seas. Cities burning while aircraft screamed overhead. "You asked how we defeated the Hollow," Yuna said. "The answer is simple. We have been fighting things that wanted to kill us since before we could write. The Hollow are terrifying. They feel no fear. They feel no pain. They do not stop until they are destroyed." She paused and looked around the chamber. "But they are not the first enemy we have faced that felt no fear. We have fought against soldiers so dedicated to their cause that they would fly their aircraft into our ships. We have fought in trenches filled with poison gas, where the air itself tried to kill us. We have fought in jungles where the enemy was invisible until they were close enough to touch." Admiral Ki-Hoon Jang stepped forward from the human delegation. He was in his late 60s, with a face like carved wood and eyes that had seen the depths of the ocean and the darkness of space. He had commanded submarines for 30 years before joining the Expeditionary Force. "If I may add something," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "The Hollow are not warriors. They are a natural disaster with teeth. They swarm. They consume. They destroy. But they do not think. They do not adapt. They do not learn. He looked at the assembled aliens. Humans have been surviving natural disasters since before we had fire. Floods, earthquakes, plagues. We do not defeat such things through strength. We defeat them through preparation, through planning, through the stubborn refusal to accept that anything is truly unstoppable. The high speaker leaned forward. You speak of preparation, but your soldiers are old, damaged. How can they fight effectively with such limitations? Una smiled slightly. It was not a kind smile. High speaker, let me tell you about the soldiers we sent to Vethra 3. Sergeant Major Yunji Beek is 62 years old. She has been shot 5 times. She has been stabbed twice. She once walked 30 kilometers through a frozen mountain range with 2 broken ribs and a bullet lodged near her spine because her unit needed extraction coordinates. She pulled up another image. It showed Dongwook Yoon, the one-armed captain. Captain Yoon lost his arm when his submarine imploded at depth. 47 of his crew died. He survived by sealing himself in a compartment and waiting 12 hours for rescue. In the dark, with water up to his chest and his arm crushed beyond saving. He has commanded naval operations for 20 years since then. Another image. Heian Lim, the combat medic. Master Sergeant Lim has saved over 300 lives in combat conditions. She has performed surgery under enemy fire. She once kept a man alive for 6 hours with nothing but a knife, some rope, and her own blood for transfusion. Una turned off the display. These are not weak soldiers. These are survivors. Every one of them has looked death in the face and chosen to keep fighting. You cannot train that kind of determination. You can only earn it through suffering. And humans have been suffering for a very long time. The chamber was completely silent now. You thought we were weak because we break easily, Una continued. But breaking is not the same as being destroyed. Humans break. Then we heal. Then we break again. And each time, we learn something. Each scar teaches us. Each wound makes us harder to kill. She looked at the high speaker directly. The Hollow are a terrible enemy. But they have never fought anything like us. They have never fought an enemy that has spent 10,000 years learning to fight itself. They have never faced the accumulated wisdom of 8,000 wars. They think they are hunters. They do not understand that they are facing the most dangerous prey the galaxy has ever produced. A Durrani delegate raised a crystalline limb. General Choi, what would you recommend the Alliance do differently in this war? Una nodded. This was the question she had been waiting for. Stop fighting the war the Hollow want you to fight, she said. You build walls, and they climb over them. You hold positions, and they overwhelm them. You react to their attacks, and they use your reactions against you. She began pacing slowly around the platform. The Hollow are predictable. They have one strategy, and they do it the same way every time. This is their weakness, not their strength. If you know what your enemy will do, you can prepare for it. You can set traps. You can channel their attacks into kill zones. You can make them pay for every meter of ground with blood and fire. Admiral Jang spoke again. The Hollow are also centralized. They operate through a hive mind. Cut off a unit from the central consciousness, and it becomes confused. Destroy a nexus node, and entire swarms lose coordination. We have been studying their communication patterns. We believe we have found vulnerabilities. The high speaker's forearms unfolded. He stood slowly, rising to his full 12-foot height. General Choi, he said, the Alliance owes humanity an apology. We dismissed you. We mocked you. We sent you to die on a lost moon. He performed what was clearly a gesture of respect among his people. We were wrong. We would be honored if human commanders would share their tactical knowledge with our forces. And we would be grateful if Earth would send more of these. Veterans. Yuna bowed her head slightly in acknowledgement. We will share everything we know, she said. And Earth will send as many volunteers as you need. She straightened and looked around the chamber one last time. The Hollow are strong, but strength alone does not win wars. Wisdom wins wars. Patience wins wars. And the stubborn refusal to accept defeat wins wars. She smiled. Humanity has all three. Let us show you how to use them. The Hollow Nexus was a nightmare made solid. It hung in space like a tumor, miles across, built from the harvested flesh and metal of 1,000 conquered worlds. Inside its twisted corridors, the hive mind pulsed and throbbed, sending commands to every hollow across the galaxy. It was the brain of the swarm, the heart of the invasion, and it had to be destroyed. Every Alliance species had tried. The Velith had sent their greatest warships. The ships never returned. The Kreth had launched assault pods filled with their finest warriors. Not one survived the journey inside. The Durrani had attempted to negotiate, hoping that some intelligence within the hive mind could be reasoned with. Their ambassadors were harvested, their crystalline bodies broken down and rebuilt into hollow. Drones. Now it was humanity's turn. 300 veterans stood in the launch bay of the assault carrier. Dawn's Edge. They were old and scarred and tired. Some walked with limps. Some had metal where flesh used to be. Some had been fighting so long that they had forgotten what peace felt like. Sergeant Major Yunji Beek walked among them, checking equipment, speaking quiet words of encouragement. She was 63 years old now. The war had added new lines to her face and new gray to her hair. But her eyes were the same as they had always been. Calm, steady, ready. Captain Dongwook Yoon stood beside a holographic display, pointing out entry routes and extraction points to his team leaders. His single hand moved with precise confidence. He had spent months studying the Nexus, learning its patterns, finding its weaknesses. Master Sergeant Haeun Lim organized her medical supplies. She knew the casualty projections. Everyone knew the casualty projections. The Alliance analysts had been very clear. The mission had a 0% chance of full survival. Someone was going to die. Probably many someones. Probably everyone. The veterans had volunteered anyway. Private First Class Junho Shin sat quietly in a corner, running final checks on his drones. He had upgraded them for this mission. They were smaller now, faster, designed to survive the electromagnetic interference inside the Nexus. They were his eyes. Without them, the assault team would be blind. General Yuna Choi's voice came through the ship's communication system. She was not coming on the mission. She was too important to risk. But she had insisted on addressing the assault team personally. I will not lie to you, she said. The odds of survival are not good. The Nexus has destroyed every force that has entered it. You will be facing an enemy in its heart, surrounded by millions of hollow, with no hope of reinforcement. She paused. But you are not like the forces that came before. You are veterans of Earth. You have faced impossible odds your entire lives. You have been told you would fail, and you succeeded anyway. You have been told you would die, and you survived anyway. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. I have served with many soldiers in my life, but I have never been prouder than I am right now, looking at you. Whatever happens today, know that you have already done more than anyone ever expected. You have shown the galaxy what humans are capable of. You have given hope to species that have forgotten what hope felt like. Her voice hardened again. Now go and finish this war. The veterans loaded into their assault shuttles. The shuttles were heavily armored, designed to punch through the Nexus's outer defenses. They would only get one chance. Once inside, there was no going back. Yoonji sat at the front of her shuttle, watching the Nexus grow larger through the view screen. It was ugly, wrong, a thing that should not exist. But she had faced ugly things before. She had faced wrong things before. One more would not break her. The shuttle shook violently as it penetrated the Nexus's outer membrane. Around them, hollow defenses activated. Energy beams lanced through space. Drones swarmed like insects. One shuttle exploded. Then another. Then a third. But the survivors broke through. Inside the Nexus, the air was thick and hot and smelled of blood. The corridors were made of fused metal and organic matter, twisting in patterns that made no sense. Walls pulsed like living things. The floor was slick with fluids that no one wanted to identify. The veterans formed up and began moving toward their objective. The central node. The brain of the hive mind. Destroy it, and the entire swarm would collapse. The hollow came at them from every direction. They poured out of the walls, dropped from the ceiling, rose up from the floor. They came in waves, endless and relentless, driven by a single purpose: destroy the intruders. The veterans fought back with everything they had. Dongwook. Yoon held a corridor intersection for 40 minutes. His single arm never tired. His combat knife found gaps in hollow armor again and again. When his ammunition ran out, he used his knife. When his knife broke, he picked up fallen hollow limbs and used those instead. Sujin Kwan, the grandmother sharpshooter, found a position with good sightlines and went to work. Her rifle cracked steadily, each shot finding its target. Hollow after hollow fell. She had been shooting for 50 years. A few million more targets would not change anything. JUNHO. Shin's drones darted through the corridors ahead of the main force, mapping routes, spotting ambushes, guiding the veterans through the maze-like interior. When the drones found the central communication array, Junho made a decision. He programmed his lead drone to fly directly into the array at maximum speed. The explosion blinded the local hive mind nodes. The hollow in the immediate area suddenly became confused, their coordination disrupted. It was only temporary, but it was enough. Han Lim moved through the chaos, doing what she had always done: saving lives. A veteran with a shattered leg. A soldier with plasma burns across her chest. A young man, barely 40, who had taken a hollow blade through his stomach. Han could not save everyone. She knew that, but she saved everyone she could. The assault team pushed deeper into the Nexus. They lost soldiers with every corridor, every room, every intersection. But they kept moving forward, because that was what veterans did. They kept moving forward. Finally, they reached the central node. It was a vast chamber, pulsing with sickly light. In the center hung something that might have been a brain, if brains could be miles across and made of harvested neural tissue from 1,000 species. It throbbed with the thoughts of the hive mind, sending commands to every hollow in existence. The demolition team moved forward. They carried enough explosives to crack a small moon. It had taken months to prepare, months to plan. Everything came down to this moment. Yoonji stood at the entrance to the chamber, holding back the hollow that tried to stop them. Her rifle was empty. Her pistol was empty. She fought with a knife and her bare hands, and when those were not enough, she fought with her teeth and her forehead and her elbows. She was 63 years old. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds. She should have been home with grandchildren, complaining about the weather and arguing about politics. Instead, she was standing in the heart of an alien horror, refusing to die. The demolition charges were set. The timer started. 10 minutes until detonation. Everyone out. Dongwook's voice cut through the chaos. Extraction point Alpha, move. The survivors began to retreat. There were not many of them now. Out of 300, perhaps 50 remained. They fought their way back through the corridors they had come from, leaving bodies behind with every step. Han found a wounded soldier who could not walk. She threw him over her shoulder and carried him. She had been shot twice now, once in the arm, once in the side. She ignored both wounds. There would be time to bleed later. Ju Juho had lost all his drones except one. He used it to guide the survivors toward the extraction point, calling out directions through his radio until his voice went hoarse. The shuttles were waiting. Not all of them. Some had been destroyed, but enough remained. The survivors piled in, dragging their wounded, leaving their dead. Yoonji was the last one through the airlock. She had taken 3 more wounds during the retreat. She was pale from blood loss, but she was still standing. She would always be standing. The shuttles launched. Behind them, the Nexus began to shake. The demolition charges had done their work. The central node was collapsing. Without it, the hive mind had no sender, no coordination, no purpose. Across the galaxy, hollow forces suddenly stopped. They stood frozen, their connection to the hive mind severed. Then, one by one, they began to fall. Without the central intelligence to drive them, they were nothing but machines without purpose. The war was over. Of the 300 veterans who had entered the Nexus, 47 walked out. The rest remained behind, their bodies scattered through the corridors of the hive mind they had destroyed. When the shuttles returned to the Alliance fleet, the Velith High Speaker was waiting. He knelt before Yoonji as she limped down the boarding ramp, supported by 2 younger soldiers. "We were wrong," he said, "about everything." Yoonji looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. She was exhausted beyond words. She hurt in places she did not know she had. She had lost friends today. Good friends. Friends who had been with her for decades. But she was still alive. And the war was won. "You were not entirely wrong," she said quietly. "We are fragile. We are short-lived. We do break." She met the alien's gaze. "But we are also what happens when broken things refuse to stay down." The Alliance erected a memorial on Vethra 3, the jungle moon where the veterans had first proven themselves. It was a simple thing. A stone pillar with names carved into it. 300 names. The ones who had gone into the Nexus. The inscription at the base read, "They were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. They were not the most advanced. They were simply the ones who would not stop." On Earth, the surviving veterans returned to quiet lives. They did not ask for parades or monuments. They simply went home to their families and tried to remember what peace felt like. General Yuna Choi gave one final address to the Alliance before retiring from service. She stood before the same council that had once mocked humanity's offer of aid. "We did not fight because we wanted glory," she said. "We fought because someone had to. And if there is one thing humans understand, it is this: when no one else will stand, we will." She bowed to the assembly. "The war is over. The Hollow are defeated. But remember what you learned. Strength is not always measured in muscles or weapons or technology. Sometimes it is measured in the simple refusal to give up." She smiled one last time. Humans learned that lesson long ago. Now, so has the galaxy. She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving silence behind her. The Alliance never underestimated humanity again.